From an early age, most people were taught a simple equation: be good, and life will be fair to you. Kindness was framed as protection, honesty as safety, patience as a shield against harm. Teachers praised it, parents reinforced it, stories rewarded it. Goodness became a quiet currency, something you carried into the world, believing it would be recognized and returned. Even suffering was explained as temporary, a test that goodness would eventually pass. Over time, this promise settled deep. It shaped decisions, silenced instincts, and offered comfort during uncertainty. It wasn't just moral advice. It was a survival strategy handed down gently, confidently, and without question. Few ever pause to examine who truly benefits from that belief alone quietly. Then reality intrudes in small, almost polite ways. Effort goes unnoticed. Loyalty is met with convenience. Fairness becomes optional when power enters the room. You do the right thing and nothing happens. Or worse, something is taken. These moments are easy to dismiss at first. You tell yourself it was timing, misunderstanding, bad luck. You try again, softer, kinder, more patient. Yet the pattern quietly repeats. The discomfort doesn't explode. It lingers. Somewhere inside, a question forms about why good intentions seem invisible exactly when they matter most. No anger yet, just confusion that refuses to fully fade away slowly. And once that question exists, it doesn't rush you. It waits. It surfaces during quiet moments, after conversations, in the space between effort and result. It asks something uncomfortable but calm. What if goodness is not protection at all, but exposure? What if the very thing meant to keep you safe also makes you readable, usable, predictable? You don't answer it yet. You just carry it forward, feeling its weight increase with every unexplained outcome that keeps happening repeatedly inside. Machiavelli is often presented as a teacher of cruelty, but that image misses something important. He was not writing from malice or desire to corrupt. He was observing patterns that repeated themselves across leaders, cities, and ordinary people. He watched how promises were broken, how loyalty shifted, how power moved regardless of moral language. His work did not celebrate this. It recorded it. Like a physician describing an illness, he focused on symptoms, not comfort. He trusted reality more than hope. That is why his words feel cold. They refuse fantasy. He did not ask how humans should behave. He asked how they actually do when stakes rise and safety disappears. Under pressure, truth quietly replaced virtue every single time. Virtue works best when everyone agrees to protect it. The problem appears when that agreement breaks. Moral behavior assumes reciprocity, restraint, and shared limits. But human interaction rarely offers those conditions for long. When one side plays fair and the other does not, outcomes stop rewarding intention. The moral person keeps rules that others quietly ignore. Over time, sacrifice replaces strength. Machiavelli noticed that goodness collapses not because it is wrong, but because it is unguarded. Ideals survive in stories. Results belong to those who adapt when the environment changes without warning. In that imbalance, morality becomes fragile, easily bent by pressure, expectation, and advantage until its original purpose quietly disappears while consequences accumulate. For the one obeying invisible rules, Machiavelli drew a quiet line between the world imagined and the world operating. One runs on ideals, fairness, and moral reward. The other moves through fear, incentive, and advantage. Confusion begins when people expect one to behave like the other. Reality does not punish exploitation by default. It responds to leverage. This is not cynicism. It is clarity. Once you see the difference, emotions settle. You stop demanding the world confirm your virtue. You begin reading situations as they are, not as they were promised to be. That shift does not harden you. It steadies you, replacing disappointment with awareness and emotional balance without demanding fairness from indifferent systems outside. Consistent goodness creates patterns others learn to read. When your reactions are always forgiving, always patient, always fair, people stop guessing. They know what you will tolerate, how far they can push, when you will stay silent. Predictability feels safe from the inside, but from the outside, it signals limited range. No threat, no surprise, no cost. Over time, moral consistency stops being interpreted as character and starts being treated as availability. Not because others are cruel, but because human behavior responds to patterns. What can be predicted can be managed, delayed, or ignored without fear of consequence entirely fully. Boundaries rarely collapse through force. They fade through accommodation. Each time you say yes when you feel no, the line moves. Each time you excuse behavior to preserve harmony, the standard lowers. Because nothing dramatic happens, it feels harmless. But excessive goodness trades clarity for comfort. Limits become suggestions. Expectations expand quietly. Others do not hear your internal objections. They respond only to what is allowed. Over time, the absence of resistance rewrites the rules of engagement. What began as kindness slowly becomes obligation, and reclaiming space later feels like aggression rather than balance, and self-respect is lost quietly. Respect is often described as something earned through virtue, but observed differently in practice. People respond less to kindness and more to consequence. Not punishment, but presence. Leverage signals seriousness. When someone can walk away, say no, or impose cost, behavior adjusts. When someone cannot, courtesy fades. This creates an unspoken hierarchy where moral language matters less than perceived strength. Those who are always agreeable are placed lower, not hated, just deeper. This is not personal. It is instinctive. Humans organize around power signals long before they organize around ethical ideals in daily social interactions everywhere. Quietly, constantly, ongoing still, those who exploit look for consistency, not chaos. Moral people offer reliability. They keep promises, assume fairness, hesitate to retaliate. This makes them efficient targets. Exploiters are not always malicious. Many are simply unrestrained. They test limits and follow the path of least resistance. When they encounter firm boundaries, they move on. When they meet moral obligation, they settle in. The exploiter does not attack goodness. They use it. Consistent virtue provides structure, and structure can be entered, navigated, and drained without confrontation or guilt, leaving the moral person confused, depleted, and questioning themselves long afterward, silently, repeatedly, again inside. Goodness often turns inward before it turns outward. When being moral becomes an identity, it starts policing behavior from the inside. You hesitate not because something is wrong, but because you might appear wrong. Guilt appears before choice. It whispers that saying no is selfish, that discomfort in others is your responsibility. Over time, this guilt no longer needs external pressure. It operates automatically, correcting thoughts, muting instincts, and rewarding self-denial. The moral code becomes a leash you hold yourself. This is not conscience at work. It is conditioning. Guilt stops guiding behavior and starts controlling it. Detaching from inherited guilt does not remove empathy. It removes the reflex to punish yourself for having limits, needs, or boundaries that were never immoral to begin with. This quiet mechanism shapes decisions long before awareness appears, keeping many trapped inside rules they never consciously chose for themselves or questioned later life. Resentment does not always arrive loudly. In people who pride themselves on goodness, it often hides behind calm language and patience. Each compromise feels reasonable alone. Together, they stack quietly. You absorb inconvenience, excuse disrespect, delay your own needs. Nothing breaks, so nothing is addressed. But the body keeps score. Irritation surfaces as fatigue, distance, or sudden indifference. Because resentment contradicts the moral image, it is pushed down instead of examined. This creates emotional fog rather than anger. You feel drained without knowing why. Recognizing this resentment is not betrayal of values. It is information. It signals imbalance, not malice. When acknowledged without drama, it restores clarity. When ignored, it hardens, distorting perception and turning kindness into obligation rather than choice. Left unattended, it quietly reshapes relationships, motivation, and self-respect, until giving feels empty and receiving feels undeserved over time, without any clear external conflict visible to others around. Inner authority is the sense that you can direct your own life. It weakens when decisions are constantly deferred to morality rather than judgment. You begin asking what is right instead of what is necessary. Over time, this hesitation erodes confidence. You stop trusting your instincts because they conflict with your image. Leadership over self is replaced by permission-seeking. Even solitude feels uneasy. This loss is gradual, almost polite. Nothing dramatic collapses, yet without inner authority, strategy becomes impossible. You react instead of choose. Rebuilding begins not with force, but with restraint. When goodness is no longer automatic, authority returns. Choice replaces compulsion. You do not become colder. You become clearer, steadier, and capable of acting without needing moral reassurance at every step. This shift restores self-command and allows engagement with the world from stability rather than obligation or fear. Driven compliance patterns learned over time, unnoticed previously. Machiavelli never argued for cruelty as a goal. He argued for choice. Optionality means you are not trapped inside a single moral response regardless of context. You can be fair without being naive, firm without being hostile, silent without being dishonest. Power, in this sense, is not domination. It is the ability to adapt without guilt. When people mistake flexibility for immorality, they confuse restraint with weakness. Machiavelli's insight was simple. Survival and influence require range. If goodness is your only move, it stops being virtue and becomes a limitation imposed on yourself. It preserves freedom in uncertain situations, where rigid virtue collapses under pressure and leaves you exposed. Unnecessarily, selective goodness is not withdrawal from ethics. It is timing. You observe first, then decide what to give and what to withhold. Kindness becomes deliberate, not automatic. This discipline prevents exhaustion and preserves respect. When goodness is chosen, it carries weight. When it is reflexive, it is invisible. Selective goodness allows you to stay humane without being consumed. It replaces compulsion with intention. You remain capable of generosity, but only when it aligns with reality, context, and long-term stability rather than impulse or fear that weakens judgment over time. Restraint creates uncertainty, and uncertainty commands attention. When people cannot predict your reactions, they treat you carefully. This is not manipulation. It is equilibrium. Silence becomes space. Delayed response becomes authority. You are no longer pulled into every demand or provocation. By not revealing everything, you retain leverage without aggression. Respect grows when others sense that access to you is conditional. Moral display seeks validation. Restraint needs none. It communicates stability, boundaries, and consequence without explanation. In complex environments, those qualities anchor position far more reliably than constant transparency or visible virtue. When pressure rises unexpectedly and stakes shift suddenly, moral distance does not mean emotional withdrawal. It means you are not fused to outcomes or approval. You can care without entanglement. This distance prevents over-identification with being good and protects clarity. You remain present, observant, and composed. Others feel it as calm strength, not coldness. Detachment allows you to step back, assess motives, and respond proportionally. You are no longer dragged by guilt or praise. This is stoic control applied socially. By holding space between values and reaction, you preserve dignity, flexibility, an inner balance in environments that reward composure over display and punish emotional excess quietly often. Instead of rushing to help, you pause. You listen more than you speak. You notice who asks, how they ask, and what happens after they receive. Observation creates distance, and distance reveals patterns. You begin seeing repeated behaviors rather than isolated moments. This slowing down is not indifference. It is awareness. When you stop reacting automatically, information accumulates. Motives surface. Dynamics clarify. You realize that many situations resolve themselves without your intervention. Others reveal where help will be wasted. By waiting, you preserve energy and avoid unnecessary entanglement. Offering less, but later, turns assistance into leverage rather than habit, and your presence gains weight without effort. This shift quietly changes how others perceive your value and boundaries over time consistently. Power dynamics exist whether acknowledged or denied. Some people influence outcomes more, speak louder, or carry consequence. Recognizing this does not require admiration. It requires realism. When you stop pretending hierarchy is unfair or imaginary, you navigate it calmly. You neither submit nor rebel. You adjust. You understand where resistance is costly and where it is respected. This awareness prevents emotional reactions disguised as principle. You maintain dignity without unnecessary confrontation. Respecting power means reading leverage, not surrendering values. It allows you to engage strategically, preserving autonomy while avoiding needless friction that drains energy and clouds judgment over time. Without this clarity, moral language often masks confusion, insecurity, and reactive behavior that benefits no one involved in complex social environments. Goodness becomes dangerous when it defines you. When it is your identity, every situation demands proof. Choosing when to be good restores control. You are no longer performing virtue. You are applying it. Sometimes restraint protects more than generosity. Sometimes silence is kinder than agreement. This choice is quiet and internal. No announcement is needed. Others feel the shift through consistency, not explanation. Agency returns when morality becomes a tool rather than a cage. You remain capable of care, but you decide its timing, direction, and limits based on reality, not expectation. This measured approach stabilizes relationships and protects inner balance without abandoning humanity or conscience in everyday life situations. When goodness is everywhere, it loses contrast. What is freely given, endlessly available, stops being noticed. The world responds differently to what is scarce. Selective virtue carries weight because it is not guaranteed. It signals discernment. When you choose carefully, others sense intention behind your actions. Your yes means something because no is possible. This restraint does not make you distant. It makes you legible. People adjust behavior around those who do not overextend. Respect follows boundaries, not explanations. In this way, controlled goodness becomes influence rather than sacrifice. It protects energy, preserves clarity, and restores balance. What is rare invites attention, not because it is withheld, but because it is deliberate. That quiet discipline reshapes how value is assigned without force, persuasion, or moral performance in everyday human interactions. Strength does not require resentment. Letting go of automatic goodness does not mean becoming hard or cynical. It means you stop bleeding quietly for ideals that were never reciprocated. There is calm in no longer needing approval. You act without urgency, without apology. Others may not understand the shift, but they feel it. You move with less friction. Bitterness fades when choice returns. You no longer carry the world's weight on your conscience. You carry awareness instead. This composure is not withdrawal. It is readiness. You remain open, but not exposed. Alert, but not tense. Grounded in reality, you stand steady, capable of kindness without surrender, and strength without noise. This balance marks maturity earned through experience rather than reaction.